Losing 263 bucks trading XOM Mobile. Let's dive into the recap. What's going on, guys? So this was technically the second trade of the day, although really it's just one trade of the day because the other trade was a U.S. oil trade that I had done the previous recap on, which I took yesterday that got closed overnight when the trailing stop hit. So this one was just a loss straight up. Here it is. Here's the chart. We had a good setup in my view. I mean, you had a good setup to the downside, like clean, nice, exactly what I'm looking for, but just kind of false breakdown and whatever. The volume was also very supportive. You know, you had the area of consolidation in here was on relatively low volume, and the breakdown push was on higher volume, and then this bounce back was on lower volume. So you do have like a pretty good signal that this wants to go lower per my strategy, and a nice push to the downside. The thing I was looking for in the bigger time frames, which also, by the way, weren't out of alignment. We are down a good bit, but my view was, if I'm looking at this, you know, big picture, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, you zoom out on the volume profile and you have a little bit of room down to like 107, maybe just below 107, down towards like 106 or so. So that's why I was targeting 107 was my area, which I thought was a very fair area to target given how weak oil's been. The market's been fairly weak, or the Dow has been pretty weak, and Exxon's been weak. Oil stocks have been pretty weak. So it's like, okay, you're playing with where the weakness is at. Good, you know, okay, makes sense. Bigger picture time frames kind of aligning, you know, cool. But the thing I think that in the grand scheme, it's not that big of a deal. It's just one of those, like, it just didn't work. But bigger picture, I probably could have like a little, you want to call it a little of a boredom trade, maybe good setup. But maybe you could say a boredom trade to some degree, although, you know, again, it's not like I'm fishing for setups here. This is a setup that was fair. The other thing was on the Dow, which was leading the market to the downside at the time. It's now reversing nicely, but check this out, right? So the Dow literally, like, as I'm getting in this trade, nips this zone, which just so happens to be 401, just below 401. Why is that important? If you jump out to the bigger time frames, that happens to be the gap fill on the daily chart of the Dow. So as I'm looking back, if I had looked at that a little closely, I'd been like, you know, maybe this is a good spot for a bounce because the market hadn't really bounced. So my only negatives to this trade, if I wrote it down too, I said valid setup. Just think we were looking a little aggressive given the rest of the market had been coming down without a bounce for a while. So if you're looking for a logical bounce point, that makes sense on that gap fill. And the Dow was leading the market down. The Dow was down the most at the time. It still is, I think. Yeah, it still is. But that was leading us down. So that was a logical spot. Now, ultimately, I was hoping that I would get a setup on the Dow because I was looking for that gap fill. I just look at the market this morning. I just never got my setup this entire way down. You know, we had a big move down and it was just like pressure. No, like even little consolidation. There's like a 5-minute span of time, but that's not enough for me. So you could say there's like some, you know, 2-bar, 3-bar plays, whatever, but I'm not going to, that's a little too much, a little too narrowed in, granular for me. I like a little bit of a bigger picture. So I wasn't going to play that. And yes, that's the only thing I can look back and say, yeah, that was probably, you know, it made sense. No, if we just blasted right through and the market kept going lower, 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 this would have probably worked and it wouldn't have mattered. So that's something to think about too. At the same time, also looking at crude oil, which has also bounced pretty much at that exact same time. So you can't, you know, it's one of those things you can't really control. Like I didn't know, you know, if I knew crude oil was going to bounce exactly right there, then yeah, I probably wouldn't have taken the trade, right? But at the same time, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, oil's been pretty weak. We had this push down yesterday. Let's see what happens here. We start to push down. Okay, we might take out these lows. And if we do, boom, you know, kind of going back to my trade from the last recap, you know, boom, we have more room here to 65. And that could have been enough to get us down to that 107 or even more on Exxon. So valid setup just didn't work. We got the bounces just right when I pretty much, or shortly after I got in. So it is what it is. Bigger picture, going back to the journal here. So we took this on 2 accounts. It was the main, the 10K account was the one that I traded on, and then it just copies to a 25K account. The 10K account is a funded account. And so we had a $75 loss on the 10K account. We lost $187.50 on the 25K account. So it's proportionally like the same, which is perfect. See, the net ROI on the account is the exact same. Good. not a problem. Bigger picture, we are down 124 on the month after 14 trades, but again, that's a little bit high because some of them are many of them are now duplicates, so maybe more like 8 to 10 trades technically on the month, which may be a little too much. I will be honest. We started off not good, and we've come back a bit, and then we had now a break even, and then this is a red trade, but pretty small in terms of the average losses and stuff. So I'm happy with that. Win rate, not great. We can get that up. We obviously know that, but that's also just been kind of a product of the market and the time we are kind of in my opinion. Average win-loss, 186 on winners and 87 on losers. That's really good shit in my view. If we keep that up and then just nudge this number higher, which my average is above 40%. Big picture, going over hundreds of trades. So if I just nudge that number up, keep this number the same, I'll be happy. And obviously, the higher we can get this number, the better. And the higher we can get this number, the better. So that's a wrap. This is TradeZilla. If you're looking for them, there's a 10% off discount link, TC10, below if you want to use them. And I'll see you guys in the next recap. Peace.